Hey, I'm Tomer Weller, Director of Partner Engineering with the Stellar Development Foundation. Super happy to be here at REIMAGINE.
Hello and welcome to Reimagine 2021. This is our 1-year anniversary and 10th edition of our conference. So super stoked. We host these events as part of our monthly series, bringing you nothing but the best projects, bright minds, and leaders in the space. We've been fortunate enough to invite many talented individuals and teams to come speak with us, providing updates, insights, and all the above that's happening in crypto. I'll be your host today, Adam, from the Mousebell team. Where we focus on early stage investments to our accelerator or providing development support to a growing number of projects, as well as education within the Mousebell University program. Our main objective and goals are simple. It's increasing adoption, use cases, and real world applications across all of our platforms, including Reimagine. So we seek to educate our audience, as much as we can on blockchain by helping them understand crypto's real impact. So I'll go ahead and stop talking here. I have an exciting guest, Tomer Weller, Director of Partner Engineering from the Stellar Development Foundation. They are one of our partners and have been for a few years now, and they've always had a speaker attend. So very fortunate. Tomer, how you doing, man?
I'm great, Adam. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome. You and I are both here in the Bay. How has your experience been so far? We're coming out of COVID. You survived, I survived, or how's it looking for you?
Yeah, I'm actually just visiting San Francisco. I've been living in an RV for the past 8 months. Oh yeah, so I've been living COVID to the max. And yeah, I'm thrilled to be here in the office for a visit. But I think it's gonna take a few more months until things go back to normal.
Nice. And for those of you tuning in, that is not a virtual background. That is actually physical.
Yeah.
That is not metaverse. That is the physical, super nice office, which I've been to. Cool, man. So let's get into it. Reimagine was born out of COVID. Everything got shut down over a year ago. We decided, let's do some video content. Let's bring in our partners. You guys have been big supporters. We've had some events with you guys for a few years now here in the city. Tech talks, panel discussions, which has been great. And so Reimagine is just kind of an extension of all of us being stuck at home, crypto taking off, people wanting to learn more. There's so much content, which this is all free on YouTube as well. So first things first, give us a little bit of your background. And then not only that, how did you fall into crypto?
Sure. So, hey, I'm Tomer. I've been Director of Partner Engineering at Stellar. Been here since 2017. Before that, I was at the MIT Media Lab, which some of you know through the Digital Currency Initiative. I actually didn't work on any cryptocurrency technology at the time. The latest project I worked on was 3D glass printing, very different from crypto. Before that, some startups in Israel, where I'm originally from. And in my very distant past, I actually owned a food truck in Berlin.
That's great. My dad actually does some catering, has a food truck as of recent, the last maybe 7-8 years. It's been going great. So that's cool. What were your thoughts? You were kind of, talking before we went live here, how did you end up at Stellar and what did you think of getting into crypto? I think at first you're like, what is this? And now you're deep in it.
Yeah. So in 2017, I was wrapping up my grad school. I was wrapping up my thesis. I was here in San Francisco, thinking about next steps. I was actually almost about to take a position in Lyft, and I talked to Jeremy Rubin, a friend from MIT and a core Bitcoin contributor. He said you should go talk to Jed because he was advising the SDF at the time. And I said, look, I don't actually do crypto, so this makes no sense. And what he told me is, saying you don't do crypto in 2017 is like saying you don't do the web in the 90s. So I listened. I met Jed the following day, who I've never heard of him before that. But when I asked him, what have you done? I had no idea what Stellar is, what Ripple is, or even what Mt. Gox was at the time. But I did know what eDonkey 2000 was, which is a project that Jed built. I think it was 99 or 2000. Big hit outside of the States. This was like the post-Napster era, and file sharing was on fire. So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah, so I met Jed, met David, and I fell in love with the project, and I, flew down to San Francisco the week later and joined.
That's crazy because Jed's an OG too, right? Like he started going to these meetups here. I'm based in San Francisco, and like that's kind of the name of the game is networking, getting out, and meeting cool people, especially in crypto blockchain. But yeah, he was going to some of those early events back in the day. So what are your thoughts then on crypto and blockchain in general? Like, what do you think its like impact is? Before we get into Stellar and all that, it's always good for our audience that's tuning in. We have students, we have industry professionals, we have investors, we have content for everybody, and everybody has their own kind of perception of what blockchain is, or only Bitcoin, or altcoins, whatever the case may be. But ultimately, crypto like touches a lot of various applications, use cases. So what is it to you personally that like, that excites you, or you think it's cool?
Yeah, if you'd ask me what's the single most important thing that the blockchain and crypto wave has brought, is it made money cool again, right? You have all of these people that are thinking about finance and like rethinking about first principles of finance, which is amazing. I'm an example. I've never worked in a fintech before Stellar, and to be honest, for the first few months in Stellar, I had a bit of a hard time admitting that I'm working at fintech. But I think it's super exciting. I think especially look at what's going on in DeFi right now. A lot of people are just like rethinking how money works, democratizing access to things like market making, and it's just amazing.
Not totally. I mean, I come from banking. So, when I came across Bitcoin in 2013, I didn't quite catch on. But it was interesting, and then obviously fell down that rabbit hole. And then once getting into the space a few years later, yeah, the accessibility, like you kind of underestimate, like you said, money isn't fun. It's old. It is what it is. There's half of the world still doesn't have access to certain financial services and instruments, and like, just even geography and regions, right, that have hyperinflation, and and crypto like can come in and really help them out. So, which is a great segue. Like, for those that may not be familiar with Stellar, talk about Stellar a little bit, and like what it is that Stellar is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, sure. So Stellar is an open payments network. It's in its core a blockchain ledger. Been around since 2014. Really focused on financial inclusion as the big story, and specifically cross-border payments. It's very fast, so transactions settle within seconds, and it's really cheap. So a transaction usually costs a fraction of a cent. And I'm really glad that you brought up the whole issue with with the underbanked or the unbanked of the world, because if you look at a country like the Philippines, you have more than 50% of the population without a bank account, but close to 100% penetration of smartphones, right? Which is really
Totally.
setting markets like the Philippines up for disruption. So so a lot of the work that we do is cross-border payments, and specifically to regions like that, you don't necessarily have a bank account, but you do have a lot of technology.
And what's the difference? So we're talking about Stellar, the technology. What about SDF? What do you guys try to accomplish, and what are the goals there? I guess to integrate and implement the technology elsewhere.
Sure. So SDF is a nonprofit foundation, and we support the development of the protocol. You can think of it like other open source foundations like Linux, for example. And some things that we do include, we contribute to various open source projects, including but not limited to Stellar Core, which is the main Stellar node implementation. We also support the ecosystem and strategic partnerships through various grant programs and collaborations. We work with the regulators to educate them about the opportunities in blockchain. And yeah, generally anything that we can do to promote the use of the Stellar network.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we do kind of underestimate, coming from, developed countries, the states, various parts of the world that have a solid infrastructure. But there are many other geographic regions that, like you said, don't have the fundamental services of financial accessibility. But the iPhone is or not the iPhone, but the technology is there, smartphones and all that to provide that accessibility. So we've had you guys on, and you guys have always talked about kind of the tech. I think last time your team was on was maybe end of the year, to close out, a couple of our conferences. And what's kind of new, I guess, with Stellar, that maybe you can update us on?
So we've seen a lot of activity this year. I think one of the big ones is that USDC launched on Stellar, which is a very reputable stable coin. And a lot of companies are already using it as their prime asset, because you have this reputable asset coming from Center, which is Coinbase and Circle. And so it's a very reputable home. And you combine that with the properties of Stellar, which is super fast, super cheap transactions, and you've got a powerhouse. So we're seeing a lot of adoption of USDC. Wire, which is one of our portfolio companies, has incorporated Stellar assets into their APIs. So currently both XLM and USDC, and they're looking into other assets. One of the things that is I find most exciting about this is the savings API, because if you look traditionally at application developers in our space, monetization is definitely one of the hardest problems to solve.
Totally.
Now, when you have companies like Wire providing savings API, you're actually allowing wallets to monetize on the balances that users hold there. So it's both good. It's good for the users, it's good for the wallets, and it's really good for everyone. So I'm super excited about that.
And what I've noticed too, my team and a couple of my colleagues, including myself, do work with some of the projects that are within kind of the most recent initiatives and programs to support startups, entrepreneurs that are developing on Stellar. And what I've noticed is that, which I'm going to circle back on this payments thing, but I've noticed that a lot of the projects we're actually exploring outside of payments too, leveraging Stellar technology for like supply chain, for other various kind of record handling, keeping.
Yeah.
Can you maybe share some of the projects that are developing within your ecosystem? And again, I want to bring this back to payments, but it's also pretty cool that you guys do, or the innovation kind of within the your guys' community is exploring other applications outside of just kind of transfer value.
Yeah, so I think community is the key word here, right? Because and this shows you the beauty of an open ecosystem and open standards, because we have developers thinking about things like NFTs. We have developers thinking about things like gaming. We have developers thinking about supply chains, and these are things that are not really. If you look at the SDF mission, they're not necessarily core to what we do. But Stellar is an open network. Anyone can innovate, and that's the beauty of that.
Definitely.
And sometimes you also see cases where people start innovating, and at one point we at the SDF look at it and we figure out, hey, this actually is really core to our mission. One example of that is all the activity we see around regulated assets, so STOs. We've seen. I think you were there at the beginning of 2018 when the craziness with ICOs happened. But an interesting thing that evolved from these early ICOs was that you could sense this. There's actually something to this, right? There's something to issuing regulated assets in these highly liquid markets with all these great properties, but the technology wasn't necessarily there. The compliance and the regulatory environment wasn't really there. And what we've seen are a lot of companies that are starting to figuring out the regulatory requirements and how to actually build regulated assets. One company is Securency, who is one of our partners. We love working with them, and they've built this amazing platform that allows you to issue regulated assets on multi-chains, not just Stellar.
Yeah.
And it was so successful that eventually we went back to the protocol and introduced a few changes that make it easier to issue these type of regulated assets.
And what are some of those? Just out of curiosity, like what makes it different from utility token, or like that's not STO related, or just in general? Is there a standard? Is it a standard in place? Is that? What would be the tweaks internally on the protocol to, allow for this type of development?
Sure. So if you look at the actual assets, we're talking about things like Reg D assets. We're talking about things like equity tokens.
Yeah.
So these are things that if you actually read the SEC rule book, it's a very thick rule book. Okay?
Yeah.
You have a long tail of requirements there. So the question is, how do we combine the good things that we have in blockchains, the ability to use DeFi instruments to actually, to bring liquidity into these assets, but, still comply with the regulation. Eventually, we came up with this hybrid model. It's an interoperability standard we call SEP8. And SEP8 allows you to basically have this off-chain service that examines transactions. And then whenever you want to submit a transaction, instead of submitting it directly to the network, you submit it to this approval server. And if the approval server thinks it's compliant, it will sign the transaction, and then the transaction is valid. So the changes we added to the protocol were changes that allow this type of interoperability between an off-chain signer and on-chain, all the goodness that we have on-chain.
Yeah. And one thing that I'm catching from kind of this initial discussion is like innovation, community, various types of projects being developed on Stellar. And my next question is, what are you guys doing? You're doing something successful in terms of allowing developers to come in to Stellar and start developing, which means like documentation, right? Support, resources. What's kind of the backing to bring more developers into Stellar that you guys try to do or try to accommodate for them to come in, whether they're native to blockchain or Web 2.0 devs, right? Because it's cumbersome. Things are more mature now, but you guys have always tried to focus on like a developer experience and growth and listening kind of back to feedback. Can you talk a little bit of how you guys strategize to have this growth of development, and it stems from like your core team?
Sure. So you were talking about docs. It's crazy the effect that good documentation has on an ecosystem. And one of the first things we hear from partners joining the Stellar ecosystem is wow, like your dev docs are one of the finest we've seen in the ecosystem. And I was actually at the MIT Bitcoin Expo a couple of years ago, and I think every developer that I talked with that I said, hey, I'm from the SDF, immediately responded with, oh, you've got great dev docs. So yeah, dev docs are really important. And I think they're good, and I think we can they can also be better, and we're working on that.
Always,
yeah, for sure. And it's really about identifying the personas of the different people who will be using the docs, because especially in Stellar, you have this dichotomy where we have the generalists, the developers coming from the wider ecosystem community. They want to build wallets, they want to learn about Stellar. Then we have the enterprise companies that are very use case driven. They want to drive cross-border payments. They want to facilitate access into their existing rails. They want to take their existing ACH rail and allow you to get USDC on the other side, or they want to facilitate REI on-ramp in Brazil, right? They're very focused. So the secret is to really cater the experience, and these are very different developers, different programming languages, different, knowledge base, and you really need to cater for all these different personas.
Yeah, no, great for clarifying that, and that's what I've heard too, and those are important. You could have the best tech and have no like users or people leveraging it. And then you could have like tech that gets the job done, maybe not superior to others, but the resources are available, the education's available, and kind of the onboarding experience is more pleasant to start not focusing on the nuts and bolts, but being able to actually like program and code and build, right? Which is kind of cool. So I also want to talk about kind of like how Stellar works, kind of going back to the payments and just kind of the rails and all that,
Sure.
which really leads me to like anchors, right? There's people that are probably like, what is Stellar? Like, I don't know, is it Bitcoin? Is it like Ethereum? And it's its own chain. It's its own world. And so you guys operate globally. There's anchors all over the world. Also delivering like interoperability within kind of the ecosystem of efficiency, like stable coins, UI, UX, and applications. Can you touch a little bit of kind of the anchor experience, what they do, and how they facilitate? People are probably thinking like, okay, cool. There's anchors or stellars in these regions. How does that even work, right? How do you convert a local fiat currency into the stellar, the stellar protocol?
Sure. Happy to talk about that. So, 4 years ago, this was really hard to explain because, no one understood what these assets actually mean. Today, it's fairly easy. You say, hey, Stellar is a network of stable coins, and suddenly people understand what you're talking about.
For sure.
So in its core, Stellar is, it's a blockchain that is super specific. So unlike some other blockchains that try to be everything for everyone, Stellar really focuses on financial inclusion and cross-border payments, and it allows it gives you the ability to do all these really important operations for cross-border payments in a very simple way and very cost efficient and very fast. So one of these things is issuing a stable coin. So let's go through a cross-border payment flow. For example, you can go to an anchor in Paris. Tempo is one of the companies we work with in Europe. They issue Euro T asset. Euro T is pegged to the euro fiat currency. That means that you can send them a SEPA transfer, which usually settles within a few hours, and then they will issue the equivalent amount of Euro T for you on the chain. And now you can take that Euro T, go to the DEX, which is the decentralized exchange baked into the Stellar protocol, and swap that for, let's say, a Naira token, a Nigerian Naira token. Then you can go to a Nigeria anchor and swap that NGNT token or Nigerian Naira token for actual Naira in your bank account. So basically, you've moved all the way from Euro to Naira by going through the blockchain. Super efficient. The actual conversion happens on chain, so it's super fast. The lengthy operations are local, so they're still relatively short in the time duration, and you've got a cross-border payment. Now, you're in the industry, you know that it's not that simple. And actually, taking money means that you need to do compliance checks, you need to do KYC. And so the Stellar ecosystem is bigger than just the Stellar protocol itself, the Stellar ledger. You need standards to actually move between different payments network. How do I actually move from a SEPA transfer to a Euro T on chain? And that's a very special thing about Stellar, that all of these things are coordinated through a set of interoperability standards. We call these SEPs, Stellar Ecosystem Proposals. And SEPs are kind of like RFCs, if you're familiar with on the web. They're these open source standards that are constantly evolving, and they give you a standard way for doing something. So if I'm a wallet and I want to integrate with an anchor, instead of having like this bespoke integration with every anchor, I can have this reusable integration. So I integrate with an anchor once, and now I can use the same standards to integrate with multiple anchors, and that gives you the network effect that we really look for.
Yeah, and I think that's important. That kind of goes to the developer experience. That goes to people wanting to integrate and implement Stellar in some capacity. What makes Stellar so quick and efficient and cheaper, as everybody kind of talks about cost of transferring? We know some of these other protocols are having issues on congestion, gas prices and things of that sort. How does Stellar, because I feel when you do payments, and this is kind of one of the challenges in general, is we're so used to automatic or as quick as it can be at the moment. Blockchain does provide a much more efficient way to settle.
Yeah.
But you guys are pretty, compared to other protocols, or everybody's kind of catching up a little bit. But you guys have been in development for a long time. So what kind of makes you guys quicker, faster, efficient?
So I think the focus is the most important thing here. Because Stellar is so focused on cross-border payments, we are super optimized to do a simple a subset of operations. Whereas in other networks, you need you have things like smart contracts and general scripting, and Stellar, you can build smart contracts on Stellar. They're very focused on the world of cross-border payments. From a consensus perspective, we use a special flavor of consensus called the Stellar Consensus Protocol, SCP. This was developed by Professor David Mazieres in Stanford, who works with us. And you can think of it more as like a traditional Byzantine agreement, but in a federated fashion. So it's just much more efficient than things like proof of work. You can get finality within like 3 to 6 seconds, which is pretty impressive compared to like obviously Bitcoin, where you usually need to wait to like 3-6 confirmations. But even other networks take some time. So I think focus really helps us out here in the consensus protocol for sure.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, those are crucial, critical points. How about like the infrastructure growth? You mentioned DEXs, wallets, stable coins. What is there anything still missing? And how has the last few years been able to produce some of these applications that allow, the facilitation of transferring, of transactions, of payments, of whatever the case is? You guys have the infrastructure to enable, a user to, have it all at the fingertips.
Yeah, so I think everything, all the components are pretty much in place right now. And I think, we've seen things like Wire add support for Stellar this year. We've seen BitGo add support for non-XLM assets, which is really important because when you go to an enterprise and you tell them, hey, you should self-custody this asset, a lot of these, old-time financial institutions will look at you weird. What does it mean self-custody an asset, right? They're used to paying for these things, and they need the service providers there, right? So we have service providers. We have more service providers coming on board. I think, in the engineering org in Stellar, we're really focused on the future and the day after tomorrow. So one of the big projects that we're working on right now is payment channels. And Stellar is a very capable network as is right now, but we all know and understand that in a few years we're probably going to be beyond capacity, right? The way that the network is growing right now. So, having 1,000 operations per second is great. But if you look at the Visa network, MasterCard, if you look at the, Square, if you're looking at the TPS numbers there, you understand that at the end of the day, there's got to be a second layer, eventually, no matter what. So we're working on a payment channels project. We actually released, or Interstellar released a couple of years ago, a beta called Starlight, which was an initial attempt at this. We're now working on some protocol changes to make it much simpler, much more efficient. So I'm really excited about this project, and it's moving super fast these days. I think this is a long-term project. One thing that's happening in the near term is liquidity pools and automatic market makers. Yeah. And I'm super excited about that. We've seen the success of retail market making in various platforms, and Uniswap have done a great job in leading the bunch there. And we finally have a protocol, a Stellar protocol that has been accepted just a couple of months ago. It's called CAP38, and it introduces liquidity pools to Stellar. So you get all the great things that you get with automatic market making tools that we already know about, the accessibility of retail market making, but you also get the great things in Stellar. So you get the super fast, the super cheap transactions. Because if you go to Uniswap right now and try to submit a transaction for a simple swap, it's gonna take some time.
Good luck. Yeah. Wait, sorry. So are you saying kind of the DeFi landscape and infrastructure is available for the tools, or are you guys building some of this stuff, or are these grant proposals out to kind of, or are you working with like Uniswaps of the world and these other lending, AMMs and lending protocols and borrowing protocols to integrate Stellar, or is this kind of going to be native to Stellar?
So we're talking about a native implementation on the Stellar protocol.
Yeah.
So probably the next protocol upgrade is going to introduce this feature. So similarly to how you have a decentralized exchange baked right into the protocol, you will have liquidity pools. Obviously, the validators still need to vote, and the ecosystem needs to agree, and it's a process. But just agreeing on in open source land, even just reaching an agreement on a protocol is already a major milestone. So we're there. The core team is already working on this implementation, and super excited about this and what this will look like on Stellar. There are other projects that are happening outside of the SDF that deal with what I call Stellar Next. You have Satoshi Pay, which is a partner of ours in Germany. They're working on a sidechain project called Pendulum. And Pendulum is basically a way to add smart contracting capabilities on Stellar, but without changing the protocol itself. So the idea is that you will, the chain will escrow a certain amount of funds on the main Stellar network, and then on the side network, you will be able to to run smart contracts and such.
Nice. And is Stellar interoperable with other chains? Is that on the roadmap? I don't even know if that's even a priority in general. I think nobody's maxed out in terms of needing to like swap assets, but it being interoperable is a key component in general in the blockchain space to free flow. How are you guys compatible or not yet?
Sure. So we definitely are full on interoperability, and the network was built. The Stellar network was built as a network of networks, right? As a means to move value between networks. The anchor model, it was based on this. So the idea is that you take value in one network and you anchor it to another network. And you actually have ERC20 tokens anchored into Stellar. You actually have, especially with multi-chain assets like USDC, you can actually go online and you have service providers that will just like swap your USDC between the different networks. If we're looking at trust minimized solutions for moving between networks, one of the first features of the Stellar network was atomic cross-chain swaps. So you can actually do atomic cross-chain swaps with Ethereum. To be honest, it's something that the general ecosystem hasn't seen a lot of adoption, not just Stellar, but the greater cryptocurrency ecosystem. The user experience around cross-chain swaps is really not quite there yet. We are looking and talking with several of the cross-chain layers, and there are some projects that have already announced support for Stellar. Flare, for example, have announced support for XLM. So we're super excited about this. I think there's still a long way to go in the world of cross-chain interoperability,
for sure,
and we haven't seen the last word on that.
Definitely, and I think it maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I misunderstood. Regarding like payment channels, and not only that, but like layer 2 solutions, scaling stuff. Is that do you see like a Stellar needing these types of solutions to scale in the long run, or how do you vision that? Everybody else is trying to figure out scalability. Ethereum has a bunch of like issues and challenges, and there's all these other like layer 2 scaling solutions for them. Where does Stellar fit in terms of like capacity, bandwidth, and like, is that part of the roadmap or not really required for Stellar?
It's definitely on our minds, scalability and layer 2 in general. Like you said, it's the ecosystem, the greater cryptocurrency ecosystem is still trying to figure it out. We've actually seen some interesting progress in Lightning this past year, so I'm super excited about that. And there's a lot of the payment channels project on Stellar that we're working on right now that's inspired by Lightning. Will that be the ultimate scalability solution? It's really hard to tell. It might be that side chains are what is eventually going to be the solution. We've got a lot of room for growth even within the network right now.
Totally.
So it's not like we're rushing, and when we don't want to rush this, we want to get it
For
right.
sure.
And we've got a lot of room to grow. And the core team is, some of the best engineers I've met in my life work at the core team in Stellar, and really making a lot of performance improvements from version to version. So right now, so just in terms of numbers, right now, we're talking about public network being capped at 200 ops per second. And as performance improves, we're going to see the validators voting to increase that number, because this is an artificial number that the network decides on.
For sure. Yeah. There's no need right now. Nobody's maxed out on throughput and stuff like that. Not yet, at least. But we all understand, like, to get to where we're, for everybody watching, like how we operate now in our legacy systems is pretty quick and efficient and effective. And it's been like this for, blockchain in general is just a buzzword, right? Distributed systems, decentralized nodes, and infrastructure protocols have been around for decades, right? And now this is kind of just a snowball effect. But one thing that I wanted to ask too is, at one point in the past, it was like blockchain and enterprise. Everybody was thinking like that they were going to adopt first. And I haven't really talked about blockchain and enterprise in quite a bit, but I know you guys work with a lot of institutions, entities. What's the sentiment there over the past, I don't know, year or two? Because at one point it was a big push, right? I mean, we have partners too, like, ING Bank, Rolls Royce, Anheuser-Busch, that are exploring the technology. And then, we brought on like a utility company, which was kind of cool, as one of our partners, which you guys are part of as well, the Education Alliance. But in general, from, the Stellar side, what are enterprises looking to do? And you touched on it a little bit in terms of payments and rails and, stable coins. But what are they are they still looking at the technologies? Is it premature? Do they know they got to maybe have this as a, an alternate option of some kind of solution?
Yeah, enterprises are an interesting part of this ecosystem. It's definitely the long game with a lot of these companies, especially if you look at banks. It takes some time to for them to start thinking about change. We've worked in the past with a lot of innovation departments in various banks. Truth of the matter is that a lot of these innovation departments sometimes are a dead end. And you've been in the industry for a while. You've lived through all the announcements of like various companies and various banks. We're doing this and that, and that's why Stellar is a bit. We're a bit more modest in terms of making these announcements. We're working with banks. We actually have, European bank, one of the oldest in Germany, issuing a euro stable coin. We're super excited about that.
And how do they use that? Like, I think people think of banks as deposits, loans, but you're also talking, well, I don't know exactly, I'm assuming, but, and I'll let you elaborate, but like, there's also a lot of interbank settlements, right? That they were exploring the technology for, not so much maybe like, holding, crypto in your bank account quite yet, but internally, when banks transfer money and settle and loan, record keeping, is that kind of what you were seeing? Well, I mean, on the Stellar side, it would be like transfer value, but being able to efficiently like move money around within banks and, I don't know, allowing, transparency and maybe security, right? Encryption processes like to align how they operate now.
Yeah, there's definitely an opportunity there, especially because if you look at institutional prices for something like becoming a Swift operator, then the prices are pretty crazy there. So there's definitely an opportunity there. I think what we've learned throughout the years is that the way to start change or to initiate change is really at the edges. The closer you get to the actual consumer, it's easier to institute change. You have more startups operating in that space. Startups and fintechs move a lot faster than traditional financial institutions. So we have like these various level of engagements with different companies. There's an ongoing discussion with banks. We did this great project with the World Bank. We did a bunch of demos with larger banks and larger remittance agents, and it's moving, but definitely in terms of kind of like at least for the short term, I think that most of the innovation we're going to see from the small players, from the fintechs that can move fast.
Yeah, for sure. And we don't have to go into it anymore, but yeah, I was just curious because we were having a lot of these discussions on the enterprise front, and the announcements and everybody, and they were trying. It was cool, but yeah, a lot of dead ends and like, how does it affect the bottom line? Like a lot of this other like concerns or questions, but we all understand how the technology can improve some of the operations internally. But we can move on. So I was in. I went to Meridian in Mexico City a couple of years ago. COVID hit. I know you guys had it virtual, but at that time, and in general, Stellar's pretty modest, like you said, and pretty low key. But a big name, like everybody knows Stellar. In the space, and even extended outside the community of the crypto community. But one of the things that's kind of cool with Stellar is like you guys don't do too much marketing. And I think during that conference, there's going to be a change. Stellar just kind of delivers, builds, and has this like robust like community, and they've had it for a long time. How have you guys been able to market yourselves in general to these regions, right? Is it through meetups? Is it through, content distribution? And we could talk high level, but Stellar is, like I said, is kind of low key, but but they're massive, and like you have people building and people know about it. How do you guys like balance that out and stay at the forefront of like one of the leading crypto companies projects, right? And that's been born.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I was there in Mexico City as well, and it was pretty awesome to have the big Stellar family all in one place. And it's amazing how everyone knows each other, and I've because I deal a lot with partners, then it's like a family reunion.
Yeah.
So that was really great. I think our marketing folks would probably argue with you, and we'll say that we're actually doing a great marketing job. But yeah, you're right. I think we're just really focused on delivering results rather than just these announcements. I think a lot of these companies that make announcements that lead to nowhere, at the end of the day, they're hurting mostly themselves. So we really try hard to to only bring something to the public attention after we've gone through an integration process. And we can share that a lot of times you start an integration process with a company, and nothing comes out of it, and that's okay. It's part of the business, right? So we're really focused on just putting a spotlight on the things that work when they work, when you actually have money moving on the network. And I think we have a lot of people give us a lot of credit because of that, and our partners really are excited about it, and are putting in the legwork to make it happen.
No, for sure. And it goes back kind of that community feel. People understand, what you're building, how you're building it. For some reason, you guys have like impeccable timing, or just kind of like you go with the market forecasting, like truly understanding. I mean, Jed, is he still involved with Stellar? Like,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. We were just working together yesterday. Yeah, he's still involved.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are visionaries over there and like understand the lay of the land from all angles, really. And you guys just target, execute, and deliver, and people see that. And that's kind of what keeps Stellar always on the radar, like regardless, like you're always there, in some capacity. So we got a couple minutes here. Like, what do you still see as some of the challenges, just to kind of go high level in crypto and the industry? I mean, we've chatted about, it's kind of crazy because I feel you guys have built so much, and in general crypto, like you would think it'd be mainstream, right? But we're not there yet at all. But we're maturing. People understand it now. It's kind of mainstream a little bit in terms of the news, and it's more getting out there. Although the technology's been around, the foundational concepts of what blockchain is, has been around for decades. Blockchain has now come in light through Bitcoin, through these other things. But what do you still see as some of the challenges? Is it education? Is it like teaching the masses what crypto is and like what its impact is? Is it I feel like the technology, we're trying to apply it a little bit to Web 2.0 and kind of past work, which that's a good transition, but we still don't know what blockchain is going to do moving forward. Nobody thought of the Ubers and your Airbnbs, right, and these other fintechs in the 90s. And it took some iterations. It took various projects to get where we're at. But what do you still see as some of the challenges that we need to tackle to get us, to continue moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I'd say, obviously there are the technical challenges,
Yeah.
but I'm an engineer, and we can solve the technical things, right? We can get the scale there, we can get the protocol in place. Obviously I think you nailed it, like the educational aspect is probably the most important one, because it's very hard for people to tell apart kind of like the crypto nonsense, so to speak, from from things that make sense. So you have things like, with all due respect, if a tweet from Elon Musk sends the entire ecosystem like on a craze, then we have a problem, right?
I was like, well, that was the first thing I thought. I'm like, what's going on here? Why is this even, being affecting the price? We should actually be buying more. No, but in general, I thought that too. Like, I'm like, why is this correlated like whatsoever?
Yeah, so
I understand.
yeah, so I think obviously like the wild speculation on cryptocurrencies needs to end, right? Because it's really not doing well for our ecosystem. But the other thing is that you also need to to separate between the value of blockchain, things like cross-border payments on Stellar, from crypto first asset, like native cryptocurrency assets, which are kind of like a different financial beast. And as long as you can understand the difference between these things, then we can make progress. But a lot of time it's really difficult, especially with what's going on in the media. So I think we're making good progress. I think from obviously from a regulatory perspective, there's still a lot of we need more clarity, especially in the US, but also in other regions around the world that we work with. So we work with that. We have folks in Washington that are talking to representatives and explaining that technology, and it's super important. So yeah, I think these are the really important things.
One last question. Just thought of it right now. Like talking about kind of advancing the space. Do you have a hard cutoff or you're good?
No, I'm good.
Yeah. Education, understanding crypto, understanding blockchain, all of these applications coming out. How do you determine, and I'm sure you see a lot of projects coming and going, how do you determine like innovation on a project with just some kind of fork or just some minor like tweak, and it's kind of not a copycat, but everybody's iterating off of everybody. Like you don't want to be the first one, you don't want to be the last one. How do you view, and you're an engineer too, so I mean, this question can be answered in a variety of ways. The team really understanding the tech, the market that it's targeting, but at a high level, you've had your sushi swaps and your uniswaps, right? You've had like these other like various applications being built that tweak some things, and then you have some that are similar that just don't make it. But how do you view, or your due diligence? And again, you see projects coming and going to diversify, but pick and choose what may or may not work, and it is a risk. Nobody knows everything, but how do you determine like what a good project is or not, or if it's a copycat?
Yeah, it's a full-time job, Adam, trying to figure that out.
For sure.
Yeah, because it's it's really hard to tell. At first, some of these projects look like a joke, and suddenly you see that there's merit to it. Yeah. And sometimes you have like fairly respectable team with advisors that are professors from wherever, and it's a money grab, right? Yeah. So it's hard to tell these things apart. Obviously the first thing I look at is the team. I go deep into a white paper, try to understand if there's actual technology in this thing. See where the money comes from, because if you can sense that something is a money grab sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Yeah. No, yeah. That was, I was just thinking about that, and us too, right? You know, we run an accelerator. We used to do investments in the past, and yeah, it's just kind of interesting. And I've been interviewing other investors in the community, and you know, how do they like determine? And it's an art, it's a skill, it's experience. But one thing that everybody does say, and you just brought it up, was the team, and kind of, you know, not to say that that makes it guaranteed successful, but you're off to a good start if the team understands like what they're trying to build, and then how do they differentiate, you know, leveraging technology to, you know, apply it one way or another. It's kind of
I've seen amazing projects that I was really into the technology go nowhere. Which also happens a lot in space, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, I think we're up on time here. We've gone quite a bit. It's been a pleasure, man. It was good talking with you.
It's great, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So, where can our audience and our viewers, which this is going to be shown internationally, people are tuning in different time zones, but where can people learn more about Stellar, learn more about the programs that you guys are putting out, and just to kind of get updated?
Sure. Go to stellar.org. We've got everything. If you're a developer, if you're in a fintech and you're interested in figuring out how Stellar can work for you, if you just want to learn about it, you know, even if you're not any of the above, just go to stellar.org. We've got really great educational material.
Awesome. So all of you tuning in, hopefully you enjoyed this discussion. Tomer Weller, Director of Partner Engineering at the Stellar Development Foundation. It was a pleasure having you. We obviously hope to have you back, if not you, somebody from your team to give us updates. We do this every month. And going back to, you know, education, really, this is kind of our effort to highlight, you know, teams and individuals like yourself that have been in the space, that are building stuff, that understand the landscape. And we're here to just showcase and highlight that to everybody that's watching. So we thank you for your time, and we hope to have you back.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one. For every watching Reimagine 2021, you can catch this during the conference. If you happen to miss it, feel free to visit our YouTube channel, where you can catch all of our discussions. Stellar's been on a few times. They also did a workshop for us, so super stoked about that. And that's it. Enjoy.